Monday, 7 a.m. I was standing in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to finish its slow, steady rise to a boil. The light from the fridge cast a pale hue over the tiles while I scrolled mindlessly through my phone. That's when the message appeared. We're more roommates than partners. No more love, no more affection. I can't fake this anymore. At first, I thought it might be a joke, some kind of bizarre typo or misfired message meant for someone else. But it was from her. The timestamp was accurate. I stared at it, blinking several times as if that would make it vanish or correct itself. The silence of the apartment suddenly felt louder, every tick of the clock behind me seeming to land like a drumbeat against my chest. I called her instantly, thumbs shaking as it hit the screen. The phone rang once, then twice, and then the line dropped. No voicemail, just an abrupt disconnection. I stared at the screen for several seconds before pressing the call button again. Same outcome. No pickup. Just gone. I took a screenshot of the message. Something in me understood this would matter later. Proof, maybe even closure. The message didn't sting, it cauterized. The kind of pain that doesn't bleed because the wound is instantly sealed by shock. We'd had cold spells before, periods where we functioned more out of habit than warmth. But this felt different. No discussion, no hesitation in her tone, as if the decision had been made long ago and I was just now receiving the memo. I set the phone down gently and walked over to the window, not really looking out, but needing something else to absorb my gaze. Outside, the morning looked like any other. Commuters loading into cars, joggers brushing past each other in patterned leggings, dogs yanking leashes in chaotic bliss. My world was imploding, but the street continued as though nothing significant had occurred. There was something perversely reassuring about that. She hadn't packed any bags. Her toothbrush was still in the cup by the sink. Her cardigan, the one with the frayed elbow, hung loosely over the back of our couch. No one makes that kind of declaration with such calm unless they've already walked away in their mind weeks before. I felt myself drifting back over the last 2 months, trying to remember if there had been signs that I had simply chosen to overlook. Quiet dinners, hesitation in her smile, conversations that skimmed the surface but never dipped beneath. I sat down on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and created a new folder on the desktop. I labeled it in all caps, separation evidence. The screenshot went in first. I opened the shared cloud account, something we both used sparingly but synced out of convenience, and began digging. It didn't take long to find what I wasn't ready to see. Chat logs that danced on the edge of secrecy, emoji-laced replies, nicknames that didn't belong to me. That was how he signed off. The messages weren't explicit, but the frequency, the tone, the timing, late nights, early mornings, said everything the words didn't. I didn't throw anything. I didn't slam the laptop shut. Instead, I minimized the window and sat back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the soft hum of the refrigerator sounding like static in my ears. She hadn't even lied. She had simply omitted and removed herself piece by piece until all that remained was a polite shell who shared my living space. Still, I didn't text back. I didn't demand explanations or start an argument she could twist into justification. I needed to think, not about whether she was coming back, that was irrelevant now, but about what my next move should be. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found the name, Victor, law school buddy. He'd taken the family law route after graduation. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I knew he'd answer. I tapped the message icon, fingers still hovering as I thought over the phrasing. Then I typed, "Hey, I need to ask a few legal questions. Can we talk this week?" Sent. Read. 3 blinking dots, then a response. "I'm free Wednesday morning. Come by the office. We'll talk." That was it. Quiet confirmation that this wasn't just emotional fallout. It was now procedural. After closing the laptop, I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of tea, though I couldn't taste it. The mug trembled slightly in my hand. I placed it down, untouched. This wasn't a time for reactions. It was a time for execution. From the outside, it would have looked like I was functioning normally. I even replied to a work email. But inside, I was mapping out a departure, one she wouldn't be prepared for. She had assumed I'd beg, argue, plead for reconciliation. That was her miscalculation. I was never going to chase after someone who had already rehearsed her exit. I left her text unanswered. Let it sit like a final headline above a blank page. Let her wonder what kind of storm brews in silence. Monday afternoon passed in a haze of measured silence. She came home around 6, grocery bags in hand, as though nothing had changed. Her demeanor was neutral, neither friendly nor tense. She placed almond milk, tomatoes, and a half-dozen protein bars into the fridge, as if we were still a couple planning for the week ahead. I observed her from the hallway, quietly taking in how casually she moved through the kitchen, how she avoided eye contact without making it obvious. She hadn't mentioned the text. I didn't ask. That alone confirmed she expected me to pretend. She dropped the truth, waited for it to hit, and assumed it would settle like dust over everything familiar. But I wasn't interested in talking anymore. I was interested in outcomes. That evening, while she showered, I opened our shared laptop again and navigated to our banking dashboards. 2 separate payroll deposits. One into the joint account, more minor and infrequent. The other, larger, consistent, funneled into a personal account I hadn't noticed before. Technically, nothing illegal. Practically, it was an explicit declaration. She had been preparing for independence long before her message. I took out my phone and snapped screenshots of each transfer, logging them meticulously into a newly created spreadsheet titled Joint versus Separate, Final. Every restaurant charge, boutique purchase, travel expense that aligned with weekends. I thought she was visiting friends. It all found its place under the column Unshared Transactions. She had been rewriting our marriage line by line, and I was just catching up to the script. Once she was asleep, face down, blanket twisted around her ankles, I returned to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water and stared at the dim reflection of myself in the microwave door. For the first time in years, I wasn't feeling betrayed. I was analyzing, dissecting the situation as if it were a business deal gone sour. There's clarity in silence, especially when the facade finally cracks. Tuesday morning, I left earlier than usual, driving to a nearby cafe instead of heading directly to the office. I opened my laptop, connected to their spotty Wi-Fi, and sent myself an encrypted file of every documented piece of evidence, financial, conversational, timestamped. I labeled it Archive Alpha. Precaution was instinctual by now. By noon, I returned to my desk at work. I answered emails, held meetings, even joked with a colleague about the boss's tie. Routine on the surface, warfare beneath. That afternoon, I dug through old documents, our lease agreement, insurance policies, tax filings. No joint mortgage, just a rental. One utility bill under her name, the rest under mine. Clean break logistics, as Victor would later describe it. I tallied the expenses we split versus those that were silently shifted into my domain. Even our subscriptions, Netflix, Spotify, meal kits, had been rerouted to my card without a single discussion. All part of a quiet withdrawal. She assumed I'd never notice. Tuesday night, she returned late. She said traffic had been terrible, tossed her bag onto the couch, and warmed up leftover lentils. We exchanged exactly 6 words over dinner. The air between us wasn't charged, it was void. A shared space occupied by 2 people who once loved each other and now simply occupied parallel lives. She looked tired. I almost asked if she was okay. Instead, I wiped my mouth with a napkin and excused myself without glancing back. Wednesday arrived with the weight of anticipation. Victor's office sat on the top floor of an aging building in Midtown. The elevator creaked as it climbed, groaning like an old man reluctant to rise. The receptionist, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes, offered me coffee while I waited. I declined. Victor greeted me with the same firm handshake he had back in law school, his eyes sharp behind rectangular frames. "You want quick, clean, and quiet?" he asked once the door shut. I nodded. "And airtight." He flipped through a legal pad, already scribbled with notes from our brief text exchange. "You've got no kids. No joint mortgage. No car in both names. This can be filed by the end of the week, technically. The cool-off period is state-mandated at 60 days. If she contests nothing, it's over as soon as the clock runs out." His efficiency gave me an odd sense of comfort, like a surgeon explaining how he would remove the tumor without damaging the surrounding tissue. He wasn't offering sympathy. He was offering precision. "She hasn't initiated anything legally?" he asked. "Only emotionally." He gave a dry smile. "Then you're ahead." He handed me a checklist. Simple but detailed. Required disclosures, final account statements, notarized signatures, and the option for constable delivery, something I hadn't considered until then. "You can hand her the papers yourself," Victor added. But if you want distance and proof, pay the sheriff's department. They complete the task within a week. Clean and official. I took the list, folded it into quarters, and placed it in my coat pocket. Back at home that evening, I typed out a single email. Calm, measured, utterly devoid of bitterness. I'm ready to discuss this if you're open. Let me know by Friday. After that, I proceed as planned. I didn't reread it. Just hit send. The message was received within 3 minutes, read within 10. I made dinner for myself, cleaned the kitchen, and went to bed without waiting up. The house felt quieter than usual that night. But the silence was different. It didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt like a beginning. Friday came without a reply. Her silence said more than any message could. That absence, calculated or careless, closed the door I'd left slightly ajar. At 7:43 a.m., I archived the email chain, dragged it into a folder marked Documented Decisions, and shut the laptop. It was time. The lawyer's checklist now lived in my jacket pocket, worn and creased like a map to something final. Each box had been methodically addressed. Asset lists organized. Electronic statements converted to PDFs and date-stamped. Every receipt, every transfer categorized and archived like a fiscal autopsy of our partnership. On Tuesday morning, I walked into Victor's office, carrying a slim folder whose contents had been distilled down to essentials. He skimmed through, nodding occasionally, tapping a red pen along the margins of a few forms. Exactly what I need, he said. We'll use irreconcilable differences, clean language. Unless you want to cite cause. I prefer the scalpel over the hammer, I replied. He smirked and dropped the pen. An assistant stepped in, collected the finalized documents, and disappeared with a quiet nod. Within the hour, everything had been uploaded to the district's digital register. No drawn-out proceedings, just confirmation numbers and legal timestamps. Then came the question of delivery. Victor leaned back in his chair, hands steepled. You sure about using the constable's office? Some clients want the control of doing it themselves. Theatrics aside, it can feel more human. Humanity ended with her text. I said evenly. Professional delivery removes the guesswork. He nodded and keyed in the request through a government portal. The constable service promised execution within a week, with signature confirmation and delivery log. We selected Sunday from the availability calendar, less disruptive to work schedules, and more inconvenient in terms of privacy. I paid the delivery fee using a separate account and provided a temporary forwarding number for contact. The logistics were as precise as a chess move, silent, deliberate, and irreversible once set in motion. That evening, I returned home and started packing discreetly. Not suitcases, just essentials, documents, devices, backup drives, a few clothes. Each item went into a sealed storage box labeled with a Sharpie. Relocation Prep 1, 2, 3. I left the boxes in the closet's far corner, obscured behind winter coats and old board games. She wouldn't notice. Her eyes hadn't met mine directly in over a week. On Saturday, I signed a lease for a furnished studio downtown, which is month to month and has a flexible exit clause. The unit was simple. Industrial ceilings, a compact kitchen, queen bed against the wall, and a desk by the window. The place didn't try to be warm. It functioned, like I intended to from now on. Sunday morning came cold and windless. I brewed coffee and sat near the window, watching a man on the sidewalk trying to tame an unruly dog. A sort of metaphor, though I didn't bother stretching it further. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed. Blocked ID. I answered. Her voice, sharp and breathless. Are you kidding me? About what? You had a constable come to my parents' house? That's how you serve divorce papers now? I let the question breathe. You chose formality, I said. I chose to match it. Silence. A quiet click. The call ended without a goodbye. I stared at the screen for a moment longer before setting the phone face down. That would likely be her only reaction, for now. Shock always takes its time before evolving into protest or regret. Later that day, I visited the new apartment with my first box of belongings. The elevator creaked as it rose to the 4th floor, carrying only my things and a quiet resolve. The key turned easily in the lock. Inside, the space echoed slightly as I stepped across the wooden floor. I unpacked a few items and placed them carefully. Laptop on the desk, toiletries in the bathroom cabinet. 3 shirts hung neatly in the wardrobe. It didn't feel like home, but it felt controlled, and that, for now, was enough. As evening settled, I sat by the window once again. The city below pulsed in gentle rhythm. Her world was likely spiraling, calls to friends, a likely dramatic retelling of events in which I'd play the villain. I imagined her pacing, ranting, crying into someone's shoulder, spinning the narrative to preserve pride. That was her pattern, but I wasn't part of that story anymore. Before midnight, she sent a message. A paragraph long. No emojis or warmth. Do you really want to throw everything away over one rough patch? Can we at least try a pause, without making it legal? I reread it twice, then typed one sentence. Your text was a formality. I just gave it a case number. I hit send, then archived the thread. There would be more silence now, maybe some passive commentary from mutual acquaintances, possibly a letter or two. But the machinery was already running. Her indecision had expired the moment she typed her first message. She just hadn't realized how fast I'd move once given permission. The legal process would grind forward, cold, exact, and indifferent to nostalgia, which, frankly, made it the perfect reflection of what we'd become. Week 5 began with gray skies and silence. The studio was still sparsely furnished, but that suited me just fine. A single plant sat near the window, a peace lily. I picked up more for the irony than the aesthetics. The blinds stayed half-drawn, and I kept the walls bare. This wasn't a space for comfort. It was a place of recalibration. Every morning, I folded my bedding with military precision, brewed coffee with the same brand of beans I'd used for years, and worked from a desk that offered zero distractions. Routine made the transition easier. She had stopped texting after my last reply. A clean break seemed unlikely, but at least there were no middle-of-the-night calls, no sudden appearances. My departure had been quiet enough that, for a while, she probably believed it was just a phase. Something temporary. Something she still had influence over. She was mistaken. Thursday evening, I completed the state-mandated Divorce and Finance module online. It took less than an hour. A sterile interface, poorly designed questions, and brief videos narrated by a man who sounded like he was half asleep. I answered everything truthfully, with minimal hesitation. The certificate of completion appeared in my inbox instantly. I forwarded it to Victor and received his usual 2-word confirmation. All logged. Every necessary form had been submitted. Required disclosures sent, delivery confirmed, and timelines locked. Nothing left but the waiting period. Just 12 more days and the decree would be eligible for signing, provided she didn't attempt to challenge anything. She hadn't yet, and that wasn't likely to change. Any move now would only expose her hesitation. On Friday, I returned to the apartment to collect a few final items. She wasn't there. Her perfume lingered in the bedroom, faint and sharp like a distant memory. I moved through the space efficiently, grabbing what was left: hard drives, chargers, winter coats. The drawers looked untouched since I'd started packing. Her side of the bed still had the same pillow, the same dent in the mattress. As I closed the front door, I paused just long enough to take in the stillness. It didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like closure. Saturday brought a letter from her, folded neatly inside a pale blue envelope, addressed in her handwriting, sealed carefully. She never sent handwritten notes during our marriage. It was always digital, texts, reminders, short voicemails. The letter was almost a performance, an attempt to romanticize something unworthy of sentiment. She asked for time. Not forgiveness, just time. A pause. A delay. She wanted to process everything before locking it into legality. She claimed the decision to send that text had been impulsive, that she was emotionally overwhelmed, that things had been more complicated than they seemed. She wondered if this needed to be permanent. Each paragraph was deliberate, with carefully chosen words designed to tug at memories. She mentioned vacations we'd taken, dinners we laughed through, moments that, according to her, proved we still had something worth rescuing. I reread the letter once, then placed it back into the envelope without refolding it. It was placed in the same drawer where I kept old receipts and expired documents. By Monday, Victor emailed a reminder. Final date eligible in 4 days. Judge will sign same day, if uncontested. The countdown was real now. I returned to the studio that evening, cooked pasta, and watched traffic crawl past the window. Across the street, a man helped his daughter tie her shoelace while balancing a grocery bag on one arm. Life continued, orderly, and indifferent. That's what I admired about the process. This wasn't about rage or payback. It was about clean lines and definitive endings. Thursday morning arrived with rain tapping lightly against the window. I ironed my shirt, checked my email, and confirmed the hearing was on the docket. Virtual, administrative, no attendance required. Victor would monitor everything and send final documentation once the judge completed the review. By noon, it was official. 62 days after her message, a court clerk stamped a decree bearing our names and the words, "Final dissolution of marriage." No ceremony, just digital ink and bureaucratic precision. Victor called me that evening. "It's finalized. You'll receive the full packet within 3 business days. I'll email scanned copies before that." Any word from her side? I asked. She didn't contest. There was a login from her attorney's portal yesterday. They viewed the final draft, made no edits, and signed off. I doubt you'll hear anything more unless she changes her mind, which, based on her history, is unlikely. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat at the desk and opened my laptop, pulling up a photo I hadn't looked at in months, one from a New Year's Eve party 2 years ago. She was laughing, wine glass tilted, hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I studied the image for exactly 12 seconds before deleting it. That night, I slept deeper than I had in weeks, because something destructive had finally ended. 3 days after the decree was finalized, a thick envelope arrived at the studio. White, official, with slightly creased edges. It had the weight of something important yet already decided. I recognized the return address immediately, Victor's office. Inside, 6 documents. One bearing the judge's signature, 4 more with stamped filing confirmations, and the last a payment summary. Each paper crisp, factual, final. I placed them neatly in a folder labeled Personal Archives, 2025, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath old tax returns and medical forms. Then I picked up my phone, took a photo of the envelope, angled against the marble countertop, her name and the court seal in full view. I sent it to her with one line typed beneath. "You said no more love. Now there are no more dramas. The chapter is closed." The message was marked as delivered almost immediately. Read 5 minutes later. No response followed. That part didn't surprise me. She rarely replied when emotions outweighed clarity. In her world, silence was often both shield and sword. I placed the phone face down and went for a walk. The late morning was clear, sky stretched thin like glass over the buildings. I passed a coffee shop we used to visit, her favorite because of the frothy matcha they always served in ceramic cups. I paused outside, watching people shuffle in and out, engaged in their entanglements. One couple argued at the curb, hands flying through the air. Another sat in silence at a corner table, scrolling separate screens without glancing up. Every story has its expiration. Mine had simply run its course earlier than I was willing to admit. She had pulled the plug in her mind long before sending that text. I just streamlined the paperwork. By week's end, I began arranging the rest of my things, more out of practicality than sentiment. A few boxes were still in storage, mostly books, a record player, some framed photos I hadn't decided whether to keep or discard. I took my time unpacking them, choosing what belonged in this new life and what no longer fit. The process was strangely satisfying, akin to editing a manuscript that had undergone too many revisions. One photo caught my attention. It was from the early days, her laughing, head tilted back, sunlight catching her cheekbones. I looked at it for a long moment before slipping it into a padded envelope and mailing it to her. No note enclosed. She'd know what it meant. Closure sometimes needs tangible evidence. In the following days, mutual acquaintances began trickling back into my orbit. Some pretended not to know. Others asked questions cloaked in polite curiosity. I kept my answers brief, leaning into simplicity. It ended. Peacefully. Nobody pushed further. Those who mattered respected the boundary. The rest faded away, their loyalties shifting like weather vanes. By mid-month, my routines had crystallized. Work during the day, reading in the evenings. Quiet meals without background noise. No tension hovering over conversations. No ambiguity weighing down each interaction. The silence, once sharp, had softened into something structured and breathable. One Saturday, I drove out to a trail just beyond the city. The climb was mild but steady, and at the summit, the view opened up to a vast expanse of pines and rooftops blurred by distance. I sat there for an hour, letting the wind pull at my sleeves while I thought of nothing in particular. The future no longer carried urgency. There were no loose ends demanding resolution. No ghosts of arguments left unresolved. That same evening, she called. It had been nearly 3 weeks. Her name appeared on the screen, untouched by custom ringtones or special icons. Just the standard gray bar, waiting for an answer. I let it ring until the voicemail clicked in. She didn't leave a message. It was the perfect end to a conversation that had already concluded in silence. Later that night, I sat down to journal, something I hadn't done since before the separation. 1 page. Just a few lines. I wrote. She gave me the script. I wrote the ending. The curtain fell, and the audience never applauded. But peace was the ovation I needed. I closed the notebook, slid it into the drawer, and turned out the light. No one had won. Nothing explosive had occurred. The world hadn't stopped spinning. The breakup wasn't cinematic. It was procedural, intentional, executed with discipline. And yet, somehow, that quiet undoing felt more powerful than any storm. Because real endings rarely come with fanfare. They arrive in envelopes, through screens, over simple sentences. And if you're ready, you recognize them for what they are.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.